think the difference between most successful entrepreneurs is that they solve problems, they make progress, they manage their time, all the things that they do.
There's a lot of good ideas, and just because it's a really good idea and it's viable doesn't mean it needs to be your idea.
Ideas are actually, it's easy to generate ideas. I think the execution of them.
So how's your day going, Bob?
My day's off to a great start.
I bet it is. You get to sit here with me. So I got a quick question before we get started. Why did the duck pull up his pants?
I have no idea.
He didn't want anyone to see his butt quack. Hold on. Wait for it. There you go. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another episode of the Mission Control Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Stearns with Ascend Digital Agency. This episode is proudly brought to you by the team at Roofer. If you need instant roof quotes, clean and pristine proposals that compels your future customers to buy, hit up Roofer. Links in the comments. Bob, I know you very well. Folks watching this may not. And if they don't, I want them to know you. Who are you?
Well, I am a college professor at the University of Buffalo, and I am an entrepreneur. So I help early stage companies grow, and I help students launch their lives as entrepreneurs.
Okay. Oh, there's a lot to peel back here. So let me ask you this. When folks decide that they want to start a business, what is the number one challenge that they're faced with that ends in their demise?
I think sometimes it's arrogance. I think what they do is they come up with an idea and they run into the marketplace. So they try to force their idea into the marketplace before they really understand what the customer wants. They don't have a perspective of the customer. So as you know, I like to start with a model service and think about how do we help customers live a better life.
Okay.
Right. So in your roofing business, we want to make sure that people have better roofing products, that their home is well maintained and safe. Mm-hmm. So I think what happens a lot of times with early stage or entrepreneurs who started is that they tend to have an idea, rush right in the marketplace, and have a lot of enthusiasm about launching without really thinking about the customer.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think especially within the context of roofing, the barrier to entry is super low, right? And you've got a lot of guys who, whether they do sales for a roofing company and they think, you know what, I'm just going to do this myself. I see all the money that's being made. I'm only getting 10% or I'm getting 5% in a company truck. I'll just do it myself. And I think it's a huge misstep, and I think that's part of the problem as far as why that percentage is out there of X amount of percentage of contractors close in the first 3 years. It's high. Some people say 60, some people say 80. I mean, I'm not a statistician, so I don't know. But it seems like the majority in the first 3 years do fold, and I think that's one of the contributing factors among others, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. If you think about what a customer would do as they buy a roofing product, it's just a whole experience. So what I like to do is think about that whole experience. You know, people didn't get up this morning and say, I want to buy a roofing system, right? They did it because they have a leak, they have a problem, they're buying a new home or building a home. And so they're not used to the experience. And so I think a lot of times what people do as entrepreneurs, they don't think about the entire experience and all the steps that people have to go through, how they find a roofer, how they call them. A lot of times, I know I've had a roofer to my house and they started explaining all the technical details. I have no idea what they're talking about. Right? I'm thinking about the process, the price, what's it going to be like? What kind of mess are they going to leave afterwards? There's nails all over the place. The attic is full of dirt. It's a very difficult process. And I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we forget there's a whole experience that goes with buying a product. And that many times is a place that somebody can differentiate and make sure that it's easy to make a decision to purchase from them, and that from beginning to end, step by step, it's taken care of.
That's a good point. And I'll take a second to explain how I met Bob. So I used to go to the University of Buffalo, and it was fortuitous that I got to meet you because I was working full-time. I had a young daughter, and, what I did was I just filtered classes by time slot. It was like a 1 to 150 time slot that I had because of my schedule. And Bob's class was there, and it was an entrepreneurship class. And, I mean, it was one of the most impactful that I had in my 9-year bachelor education program. We took the scenic route, but we got here, okay? It really was. And you talked about like product market fit and doing market research. And there's a few things that we'll talk about that really helped me immensely in life. one of which was goal setting. You made us, and I got to be honest with you, I'll tell you now because it's 7-8 years later, I fucking hated it.
I can always change your grade.
Yeah. So we entered the class, and one of the first activities was you're going to keep a journal, and you're going to track where you're spending your time. And it was, down to the hour, what are you doing throughout the day? It might have been like, 15, 30 minutes. But it was really eye-opening because I'd never done anything like that before. So I found that, I spent 2 hours on Facebook today. I spent 3 hours on the fantasy football app. I was on ESPN for another 45 minutes. I was in my text messaging app and it wasn't like I was running a business and I'm corresponding with customers. It was, I'm wasting 9 hours a day doing absolutely nothing. And that time's important, right? Time's one commodity that's not replenishable. We can't get it back. What would you say to the folks that are out there and they would benefit from goal setting? Like, what's the first step? Would you have them create a diary as far as where they're spending their time?
I think that is a technique that works. I mean, if you think about what happens is we all have the same amount of time, and some people seem to accomplish a lot more with their time than other people do.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is it's very easy to be distracted by fantasy football or placing a bet on the game on Sunday. And before you know it, there's very small paper, I call them paper cuts, right? So there's very small paper cuts of your time add up to a big wound. The difference is as an entrepreneur, your time is really critical. And so if you just think about long-term, so we're running a marathon here, but so what we want to be able to do is if we could just free up a few hours a week that are allocated to things that don't really make our lives better or our business better, week on, week off, those hours add up. Imagine you did 2 hours a week for the entire year. You have 100 hours of work. Imagine what you can accomplish.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll see, especially small businesses, complaining they don't have enough time to do everything. And yet there's 100 hours just sitting there for the taking, right? And many times what happens is as an entrepreneur gets frustrated, they tend to do things that aren't really functional or help build their business, right? They clean their office, they clean their truck, they go for an extra coffee, they watch a Seinfeld video or a Larry David video to make them laugh, or go on YouTube. They watch your podcast.
They watch the podcast.
And so what happens is before you know it, those hours just start to trickle away.
Yeah.
And you have demands of your life and your family. And so what I found is you have to be very intentional about where you spend your time and realize, do I want to spend time on my fantasy football team, or do I want to secure that website that leads me to a bigger business?
Yeah.
Right. And, if you remember, I really like to try to frame things from a perspective of freedom, right? So a lot of entrepreneurs say, I want to do this because I want to be the boss. But I think what they're really trying to express is they're looking for a life of freedom. So they're looking for, freedom of time and impact and the kind of relationships and people that they want in their own life, not to be bossed around by somebody else. So they start a company, but the thing that keeps them from that freedom is time management. And that's why I always do that in my classes.
Yeah, I'll say personally, since I started my business, probably the most challenging aspect of it is getting rid of the distractions. And distractions are Facebook, distractions are bullshit messaging back and forth, distractions are video games, or whatever your distractions are in that sense. That's one type of distraction. The other type of distraction is, there's a lot of good ideas, and just because it's a really good idea and it's viable doesn't mean it needs to be your idea, right? Because I've got 6 things in my mind right now where I'm like, this would make a lot of money, right? But everything that I take on diverts my attention from what the core competencies of what we do at Ascend Digital are, and it's unfair to my customers, it's unfair to prospective customers, and at some point it would manifest itself in a negative way in revenue, customer experience, and things like that. And that for me was still challenging. I've got to be very intentional every single day to try to keep the blinders on so that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs, especially creative people like you, never have a shortage of ideas. It's not the ideas that I find ever hold people back. It's the execution of them. And what happens is many times you just back burner the ideas till later, until you have a team that can help you do it. So one of the things I know that you're really good at is building a team around you to help to develop these ideas to benefit your customers, right? And I did the same thing. If you remember, I was an entrepreneur before I became a college professor. And so what I saw is the limitation of the business was the limitation of the team I built, right? And I tried to fill that gap just being brute force, right? Just work 20 hours a day. I'm going to do everything myself. And what I found is when my skill set advanced to where I started to allow other people with even higher level capabilities than I have to do certain tasks, that's when I was able to build significant businesses. It was the ability of the team. My job was still to come up with the vision and the strategies to get us there, but they could do all these tasks, and that's kind of what you're describing, right? So as your unique capabilities are ideas and working with people and building teams, but we get pulled sometimes into the detail and we don't realize, gosh, maybe there's another team member that we might be able to add that can be, who would know how to do some of those things, right? And advance your business. So I think you're under the right direction there. And a lot of, especially solo entrepreneurs, don't realize that, you don't have to hire a full-time person. There's all kinds of ways now that you can add partial team members who are really thrilled to work a couple hours on a project, maybe answer phones. Right? Upwork is a place I get a lot of people to help me with the work that I do.
Yeah, Upwork's a great resource. And what kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about as far as identifying the time, where you're spending it, that doesn't only go for like doing things that don't contribute value to your business, but that also goes as far as like wearing too many hats. So what I find a lot of times is you've got somebody who's obsessing over, I've got to wear these 7 hats, right? And I can't afford to hire somebody else. But at some point, that's just simply not the case. So if you start documenting where your time's spent inside the business, right? You're running admin, you're setting up production, you're doing project management, you're working with a marketing company, you're answering the phones. If you start saying, okay, make a list of not only things that are distracting you, but make a list of things that you're doing on a day-to-day within your business, and what are things that you can do, what are things that you can't do, right? Now let's take a look at what you value your time at. Is it $200 an hour, $100 an hour, $500 an hour? You start doing some quick math, and it's like you can't afford not to hire somebody to do this stuff, right?
Yeah, not hiring costs you money, right? So if you think about that construct of the time you just talked about, 80% of that time could be delegated or could be delivered by another team member, right? So if you think about the value creation of the 20% highest effectiveness, and that's your hourly rate, that other 80%, you're selling yourself at a discount. Yeah. And so if you think about it, what you want to do is, of course you have to do that for some time, but you have to think about putting systems and people in place to do that. I call it 10Xing. So what you always want to be doing is 10Xing your value creation. The only way you can do that and get through that performance ceiling that's holding you back is to get rid of 80% of the tasks you're currently doing. And you take the 80% that you're not good at or don't like to do and find somebody else. There's somebody else better at it who loves doing it.
That's a good point. Now, what I find is that there's two sides of this. There's the folks that hang on to the vine for too long and they're unwilling to delegate. And then there's the folks that get rid of that grind and that moxie that they have too early and they start delegating out too early. If you're running a business, let's say a roofing company, like at what point in time do you say, you know what, I need to hire somebody? Like I can't do everything.
I think as soon as you look and you find that 20% is not being valued properly, let's say that your 20%, that your best ability is the ability to make the sales call, to make the sale, right? Then that's where you should spend your time. But if you're finding out that you're on the roof and you're not putting time into creating that holistic experience I talked about a few minutes ago with the person, so you show up and you're a mess, right? You've been sweating all day. There are people that might be a trust element. So I think what you have to do is really think about when you make that inflection, it's because you're creating more value, right? And I think sometimes it's hard for people because they hold on because it seems like they're back to the money thing. It seems like they're making a little bit more money. And what happens is they're going to find out, gosh, if you took that extra couple hours, how many more sales would you get?
Right.
You'd book 3 more homes and tens of thousands of extra profit. Well, that's what you use that money to hire those extra people. And again, you don't have to hire a full-time person. I mean, there's all kinds of people I use all the time that are working an hour a day, a couple hours a week. They're trying to fit it into their schedule. We live in a new economy where people want to work remotely and they're willing to fit that into their schedule. It might be answering phones. It could be doing some marketing. You help people with their marketing, and think about how much extra value you create when they outsource their marketing to your company. It's the same kind of thing. So I think it's hard. And the reality is you're going to screw it up.
Yeah.
Right. We screw it up all the time. I make mistakes all the time. We just fix them.
Yeah.
So that's what we do as entrepreneurs. I mean, I bet you a roofer never puts a perfect roof on that doesn't go, oh, we got to make an adjustment here. Right. There's always give and take in anything. And I think that's the same thing in entrepreneurship, is that we're going to screw up. We're going to hire some people that didn't do a good job. We're going to have to replace them. There's times when we held on a little too long. I wish I would have done that 6 months ago. Don't beat yourself up. I mean, that's just part of the nature of running a business, is that we're going to have to be agile and keep making improvements.
So all my folks with egos out there, it's okay not to be perfect, okay? What we want to do, and this is what I tell my team, like, we want to move the needle. If this is imperfect, this is perfect. We want to move the needle as far away from imperfect as possible. We're not going to be perfect.
Not at all.
We're going to try our damnedest, though.
There's old philosophy that says focus on progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
And a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we just want everything. We want it to be perfect. And the reality is that's the enemy of making that progress, right? So it's like, just be better tomorrow than you were today.
Yeah, and that wanting to be perfect, that aspiration to win or not lose, right? You can look at it one of two ways. It's funny, right? Because it's a cape and a kryptonite. It's what drives you to consistently optimize and be cognizant of the things that aren't perfect, that are holding you back, that are making you less profitable. And it's fucking taxing. It's exhausting to have that energy in you all day and to be looking through that lens. It's
extremely taxing. And that goes back to time management. One of the things I found is I did the same thing with my business, is I just grind and grind and grind. And I wore out relationships. I wore myself out physically. I think it's important in that time management to make sure you schedule some days that you can recharge, right? On an entire day where you're not doing any business at all, right? You're not working on the business. You're not coming up with ideas. You're literally with your family or with friends, and you're just having fun. So I think that all these things are a balancing act, but they keep coming back to time management, right? So it's like, how do we use our time and resources to grow? The other thing is I found is that it's really important to think about a bigger, kind of purpose with your business. Like, why are you doing it? Right. So is it serving people? Is it, because you want to grow a bigger, better life for yourself and your family? And that's how I kind of focus. So that I'm always measuring the progress towards those kind of goals versus perfection. It's just when you're going to exhaust yourself. And I think a lot of people leave business because they're exhausted. It's not that they're not making profit. They just can't cope with the stress any longer.
It's fucking stressful, isn't it? Listen, I gotta tell you, I'm not perfect at coping either. Like, we're working on it in therapy. It's fine. They tell me I'm making progress. What's the first thing you would do if you started a business today?
If I started today, I recently started a new business, and the entire work that we did was really focused on what the market needs were. It was about thinking about the perspective of the customer. In our case, I work with a lot of college students, and what I saw was that college students don't know anything about personal finance. They were just devoid of it. They're running up very big college loans. They're not spending money well. They're not saving. They're not investing. They're not thinking about side hustles and starting companies. And all of this is really causing a lot of stress and turmoil with them. So I really studied the marketplace. I wanted to understand from a college student's perspective, what could I do to help them start the journey of personal financial management? And what we found is that if we start them when they're in college, they can be financially free by the time they're 40. Right? But no one is talking about this to college and high school students, that if they can get a little bit of this money, and we're talking about like save $100 a month, right? Go Uber, go DoorDash. It's actually easy to do it, but it's easy not to because of all the distractions. They're distracted by a lot of things that are happening in their lives.
TikTok.
Yeah. Hang on a second. I got to check my app.
Yeah, right. Right. I like what you said there, though, for college and for high school, because I think that that's an incredibly valuable skill set, and I think that there's not enough focus on that even in, primary school, right? It's like just simple life skills that you could pick up. Like, we never learned how to balance a checkbook in school. I think that's crazy. I mean, I don't really use checks, but it would have been nice to know 15 years ago. But
they have accounts, and they don't understand how the markets are. They're very complicated. They got a lot of other things going on. But what we've done is we're now on over 50 college campuses. We have thousands and thousands of students. Their lives are changing because we're showing them a very basic, simple system to get started with their personal finance. So to answer your question, it's really about thinking about who do you want to serve, and what kind of things are in the marketplace where there are unmet needs, right? So what's the problem that's keeping people from being able to have a better personal financial life? That drew me to helping students, right? In your marketplace is that you have to think more about than just the roofing. Like, what's that holistic experience that somebody goes through about changing the roof or putting a new roof on their home, right? So I think holistically about all the steps and really understand the marketplace, then I build product.
What's more important, being one of the best, or what's more important, being one of the best or being different?
I think it's both. This is one of those.
I tried to set you up.
Yeah,
you didn't take the bait.
No, I think it's both. So I think the difference comes into I like to find a group of people who have an outcome, something that they want, some kind of value in their life that and they have money to pay for it, right? So they can be customers, and I design for that small group, and that makes me different. Because I'm going to design a product or a process that's for people that other people haven't thought of. And then I'm going to be the best in the world at delivering that for them. So it's really about the most value creation I ever have in my businesses is when I do something different than everyone else, and I do it better than anybody could ever anticipate doing. So because I'm going to get copycats. Yep. There's going to be a lot of other people come and try to be me and try to do what we do inside of our business. And they're just not going to be able to do it because we're going to do world-class work so that we can be better than everyone. So I think it's both.
Yeah. And you used to also preach all the time when it came to having ideas. And we did we did a project where we had to create something, and we did like pressure sensors on the bottom of the library seat, because the problem at college is, like, especially this college, you go to Cape and library and you couldn't find a fucking chair anywhere. It was awful. And it's like, oh, we got this, we're doing this, and it's like, we always question, like, well, what if you put an idea out there and somebody else takes, like, by the time they get there, you're light years ahead of them, right? That's interesting.
I never really worry about somebody else stealing our ideas. Because the reality is there are ideas. If you and I had the exact same business to start, it would be different the second day. Right. We have very different personalities and experience sets. There'd be some things that overlap, right? And there'd be other things that you would take it your direction and your style, and I would take it my way. So I've never really been concerned about people stealing ideas. I put them out there all the time. Ideas are actually easy. It's easy to generate ideas. I think the execution of them, hard. Right? I think that's where people stumble. It's like, oh, I have an idea, but they just don't go out and do it. And I think the difference between most successful entrepreneurs is that they just go execute. They solve problems, they make progress, they manage their time well, all the things that we're talking about today.
How important is it for younger companies or older companies, how important is it to take yourself out of your comfort zone, to put yourself out there, to be open to networking, and just to be situationally aware and self-aware as far as opportunities around you?
Well, I think you want to always be looking for ideas, right? I mean, the world's constantly changing. Everyone hears about AI today, and AI is changing how we look at generating businesses, how we work with customers. So, I mean, there's always going to be new technology. There's always going to be change. And so I think we have to be okay with that as entrepreneurs and embrace it and look at how it can help us create more value. Sure. Right. So I think that we always want to be open to that. Networking, and that's another whole big topic, is that, so the thing is, we're kind of touching on this. It's like, so I think about how I might be able to get a whole value creation system together. Like, how do I get customers and how do I create great products for them? Well, that's, again, back to, it's more than me. So the networking, a lot of people, so I see students and they get taught networking, right? They put the name tag on a certain place and here's how to do the secret handshake. And, they walk, and then we send them into a room, right? To talk to complete strangers to ask for favors. And we wonder why that's uncomfortable, because, we know that that's a weird thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. You walk up to a stranger, ask them for favors. They don't even know who I am. So that's not my approach. Is that networking is really about building relationships with other people that you can serve. Right. And then eventually you know enough people that those people have these expertise that can help you when you want to launch and use those new ideas and grow your business, right? So if you think about it, there was one I was saying, what was it? Frank Sinatra didn't move the pianos, right? So we're always building teams so that we can do things. And sometimes the team isn't a paid person, it's a friend. Right? We share notes all the time about ideas. And so what we want to do with networking is it's not looking for other people to serve us. We serve them first. And then it's great how things come back to help us. Yeah. Right? It's kind of one of those karma things. But to me, I'm always open. I like networking groups because you get to meet people. I get a lot of ideas from industries I'm not in. Yeah. I'll look at new business models or new practices or whether they use some computer system or marketing. And I think that gives me ideas for the businesses that I do. Right? So I think I'm always open, but I really like to spend time with other people because they have ideas I don't have.
Yeah. I mean, that's really well put. Networking groups are great. You got to teach me the secret handshake, though, if you know it. So
that's what took you 9 years to get to school.
All right. You don't got to beat me up about it. All right. So, yeah. And I can attest that we were sitting in class and you're like, oh, you've got a set of skills as far as communication and you should put yourself out there. And I'm like, make every excuse why I can't, right? I work full time, I go to school full time, I have a kid, I have a girlfriend, I have all these things, and I'm like, I'm running, and it's like, yeah, you could find time though, and I did find time. So I went right down the street actually to the Dig Innovation Center. Is it still there? I don't even know if it's still there.
Right behind us.
Oh, right behind us. Fantastic. Yeah. So they used to do this thing called Startup Grind, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was like 26, about to graduate from college. I was doing collections for the last 8 years because they were flexible enough with my schedule given the hectic nature of it, and I got paid well because I was good at what I did. And I knew I wasn't going to do that. In fact, I committed to myself, I'll never do collections again once I graduated. And it's not because it's a bad deal. It's just, it's exhausting, right? It was a lot, and I needed to change the scenery. So I go to the Startup Grind, I start shaking hands and just hanging out, talking to people, right? And it was uncomfortable. Same way that like doing video content for me, the first time I hit record was wildly uncomfortable. I'm considered, I think, objectively as like an extrovert, and I can communicate with people. Put the camera on the first time, I'm like, so I go there, I'm talking to people, and maybe I stuttered a little bit, maybe I didn't. I can't call it. But what I'll tell you is that I made a relationship with somebody, and they had like a HIPAA compliant data exchange for hospitals, right? And I looked at who else was in the market because you taught me to do product market research, right? And there was like Tiger Text, there was Imprivata, and there were these things, and then there was this company. And this company had a few key points of distinction that actually were quite awesome. And what they were, and I'm going to go into the weeds a little bit here, so you guys got to bear with me. Essentially, if I recall correctly, they were able to receive imaging remotely in a HIPAA-compliant fashion, right? So if a neurologist needed to see an MRI, he could do it while he's at the kitchen table with his wife and then decide, okay, like, I need to get to work. As opposed to coming in, commuting, and needlessly, and then like, oh, okay, it's fine. So I thought that was really cool. I thought that would be pretty compelling. And that's what I thought. Come to find out, nobody gave a shit, right? Because they're like, we fucking hate using these things. We just text. Even though it's not HIPAA compliant, we text, but we have to have something, so there was still an opportunity. So I cold emailed Dr. Lod Levy of Gates Vascular, and I asked him, I'm like, we got some cool tech, and I think you guys would be really interested in it. Cold emails work sometimes, guys. He responded, and this guy's resume is 98 pages long. Shout out to Dr. Levy, incredible. And he's like, yeah, come on, why don't you come on in Thursday or Wednesday? It was the day before Thanksgiving. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, Donna, my assistant, will reach out to you. And I'm like, oh shit, I feel important. I got assistants reaching out to me and shit. So she sends the information. I go up to this, I think it was the 6th floor of the Jacobs Institute, and there's nobody there. It's empty. So I'm like, okay. So I start emailing. They're like, yeah, we'll be right with you. We're in a meeting. Here comes Dr. Levy. He brings me into the office. There's like 22 neurosurgeons sitting there. And I have an iPhone 4 to demo this product that I've been prepping for 2 weeks on this demo. And now I've got to demonstrate it to 22 people. Like, you've got something to hook up to the screen? I'm like, I fucking don't. I have this, actually. So I start going through it and whatever. And I wasn't a part of what happened in the subsequent. I know that there were a couple other meetings and things like that, but what I'll tell you is that putting myself in that opportunity to go to Startup Grind, to be uncomfortable, to go meet with people that were way out of my league as far as intelligence, and it was probably one of the most uncomfortable things I did at the time. I mean, I was shaky, and but that led to confidence when I then graduated to go to get into sales. Like, I know now that I can do face-to-face sales because nothing is going to catch me as off guard as walking into a room with people that are infinitely more smart than me and have more wisdom. And so I ended up getting a job doing sales, ended up working for a company for a really long time, and then I ended up starting my own company with some of the things that I picked up there, some of the things I've gone above and beyond to learn outside of that, and none of that would have happened if I didn't go to Startup Grind. Yeah. Isn't that some shit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is that you don't get confidence and then go do things. You do things and then get confidence.
Yeah.
Everyone has it backwards, right? So so the thing is, and every entrepreneur has to go through this, is that when you go out, especially when you start dealing with customers, right? So there's a lot of people with technical skill who then have to start dealing with outside people. I mean, I remember giving my first presentation, my heart just leaped out of my chest. I was so nervous about it. But so what you do is you just make a commitment. And then you're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to be in a tough situation. You're not feel comfortable. Have a little bit of courage, and you'll build that confidence, right? Every time you do that, you get more and more confidence. Now you're completely comfortable with being at a microphone and working with people. You took the advantage of these opportunities in order to build that confidence. Same thing. If you go out, a lot of entrepreneurs don't like to do the sales part, right? So there's people involved. And we work with them to, this comes from a Stanford technique where they learned how to get people to overcome fear of snakes, right? So they put them in two separate rooms with a two-way mirror so the person knows the snake can't get to them. Just watch the snake for a little bit. And then they move them to the doorway. Stand outside in the hallway, you're just at the doorway, then at the doorway, then in the door. Before you know it, the snake's around their neck. Right? And it's the same kind of thing in sales or any part of your business. Sometimes you just got to jump in there, make the commitment. But I like to frame it that I'm going to take this risk or be vulnerable because I'm trying for that big outcome. Right? I'm trying to build something better for my family. I'm trying to build a business, or I'm trying to reach a certain level of economic freedom or whatever it might be. I want more time, and this business is going to help me. So but it's a good point. A lot of people think, oh, I get everything together and I have the confidence, then I'll go do sales. The reality is, this has got to go start selling.
Yeah, and like if you fuck it up, no one gives a shit.
No one even notices.
You're
the only one that knows you screwed up, right?
Yeah, and then you just tell yourself, get over yourself. It's not that serious. It's interesting. I was listening to Alex Hormozy recently. I listen to him a lot. That he's pretty smart, and he was talking about like general confidence and then domain specific confidence. And he was talking about somebody on Xbox, and you've got some of the most introverted people out there on Xbox, and they're on Twitch, and they're streaming to 1 million people now because they're just an absolute god, and they've got the swagger that's on a zillion when they're slaying people in Call of Duty. But if you take them outside of that context, they don't have that same confidence. But his point was that if you don't have confidence about something, sometimes you can leverage confidence from other facets of life that you are good at and kind of parlay that into a bit more self-esteem going into a situation to where you could feel more comfortable.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we borrow these attributes all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, and confidence is something that, you do build over time. And you do have to watch. Sometimes you don't want to be overconfident, right? You make a decision. Arrogant. Okay. Arrogance and confidence, like a little tough one, right?
How do you make the distinction between the two?
I don't think there's much of a distinction. I think sometimes it's in the perception of the person. So one of the things I have found is that confident people are perceived as arrogant by non-confident people, right? It's the person who sees you being confident that goes, oh, he's a little arrogant, right? Because that's the way they kind of deal with their lack of confidence, right? So I see that in a lot of students. So I get to observe a lot of behavior in people that are developing skill sets and learning, right? And they're in a position like you were as a student, where there's a lot of new information. They're maybe getting a different approach that they've never seen before. And so I see how people interact with that. And some of the people who get to the high confidence levels, the students who don't reach that, they're the ones that call those top students arrogant. So I think a lot of times it's the perception of the other person.
I mean, I've been wrongly accused of being arrogant on multiple occasions, more than I'd like to admit. What I always said is like, I think that where I draw the line is like arrogant folks won't be proactive in admitting that they don't know things, right? They'll have that same level of confidence for subject matter that they're experts in with things that they know nothing about. And for me, that's kind of the difference, which is hard to tell from the outside. But me internally, I'm like, I'm not arrogant because I'm the first one to tell you I have no fucking idea. If I don't, and I know there's so much more shit that I don't know than I do, and it'll always be that way, right? You've only got so many hours in a day, and it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay not to.
Well, I think that's another sign of confidence. I mean, it takes a confident person to say, I have a clue about this, right? So many people, again, that don't have a lot of confidence or on the lower spectrum of that confidence will act as if they do have confidence, and they'll say they do in an area they don't know anything. Well, you and I are constantly like, we have no idea about this. We've had these conversations like, I have no idea, right? And it's like, we're okay with that vulnerability because we are people with some confidence in some of those zones that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting when you look at a lot of these subjects, right? Because people study these at universities, do a lot of research. And a lot of these kind of things like creativity comes through dealing with vulnerability. If you're not vulnerable and you don't take chances and build confidence, it's hard to grow businesses. So we know as developing hundreds of companies that we have to handle these human issues. Right. And if you don't handle the human issues, then the entrepreneur tends not to be gritty enough and they don't stick to it long enough to make a company successful. Right? So I think we're talking about them today, but they're really important that people understand that everyone goes through these things. Right? How you build confidence, how you build skills like sales, you're recognizing that you don't know everything, how to build a team. We've covered a whole bunch. How you manage your time. Those are all personal attributes. Notice we haven't gotten into accounting and finance and there's human resources. We're talking about the entrepreneur and the development of the entrepreneur. And if we do that well, there are other things we can find.
I like that. That's some good shit. And I want to take a minute to make a distinction. When you say vulnerable, I think like the connotative meaning is negative, and especially to guys that have egos. We all have egos, some more so than others, but people don't like being vulnerable, and they associate like being vulnerable is not necessarily crying on your couch or in your wife's arms, because you had a rough day, right? Being vulnerable, you can say, okay, I don't know something, or I need help here. In any facet of your business or life. So there's degrees to it. And I think that a lot of people are afraid to be vulnerable. They're afraid to pick up that camera, hit record, and start talking about things, even though they're subject matter experts, right? I tell roofers all the time, like, hop on a roof. Like, if you want to do the Stanford snake test, get on a roof and don't point it at yourself. Just talk about the roof. Talk about what's going on with the shingles. Talk about the different components. Think of things you're asked throughout your sales cycle, right? Things that customers asked you in the past. If one homeowner is asking you, there's probably more that want to know about it. And then just, shoot it like that. Then let's graduate. Let's take another step. Now we can get you on camera, your face. Or if you don't want to do that, if you're adamant against doing that, be resourceful. Find one of your salespeople or somebody else that can create content for you. Content's so important. I mean, you guys are watching this. I mean, it's great content. Don't get me wrong, but content.
It is, and you can substitute uncomfortable for vulnerable, right? Yeah. If it gets too wishy-washy for men, it's like,
I like that.
It's uncomfortable,
yeah,
right? I just don't feel comfortable right now, right? So think of it that way. And that's what, like, when in the content is really important. Remember that customer experience piece we talked about, right? The part of a customer experience is I like to say people have to know, like, and trust you before they will try and buy your product. The way people today get to know, like, and trust you is through that content, right? So people, you can be genuine. They don't expect you to be a Hollywood actor all made up with special lighting. They're okay with the
imperfect hair.
Hey. I'm the expert at imperfect hair. And so the idea is that, okay, so they want to know people who literally know how to do the job. And they want you to be genuine. It's okay. They don't expect super polished, high production. In fact, there's a lot of studies that show the high production polished things seem fake to consumers, right? Because they go, that doesn't make sense. A plumber's doing that, right? That's like too good. So I think and I like what you said. Just try. Do the first ones that you're the only one that sees it, right? It's okay. We talked about networking, so I like to get groups of people and go here. I played a lot of sports as a kid. And so I was okay getting constructive feedback about how to improve because I wanted to win. I didn't like to lose. So I wanted to win. So, okay, so tell me how to be a better pitcher. Tell me how to be a better player. And so it's the same thing. So do some film, watch it on your own first. Think of it like a game film in a football game, and then make some tweaks. Try it again. And then get some friends that you trust, right? And they might bust on you a little bit, but, and have them give you some feedback. So it's the same kind of process that you're talking about with the snake. Right, so it's the idea is just take a step by step. But I think ultimately having great content will build that people get to know, like, and trust you, and they will buy your product because of that content and that authenticity.
Yeah, or they'll run in the other direction, and that's fine too, because not everyone's your customer.
No.
Yeah, and I think more people need to be okay with that.
Well, there's going to be times they're not a good fit for you. You shouldn't hire them. As a customer, right? I mean, I used to say in my businesses, like, we're firing that customer. Like, they're a horrible customer, right? They don't pay on time. They're always trying to beat the system. They don't follow our processes. We have a process that works. And now they're coming in without any expertise and disrupting our business. Well, we don't need that. There's lots of customers in the world. We're looking for the ones that are a good fit for our business. And I'm sure that all of the people listening to the podcast can think the same way.
Absolutely. And when and it's your job as the leader to make sure that you're hedging and protecting against that, because when you bring that unnecessary friction into your business, like, that creates dysfunction within your team. It makes people less happy doing their job. Like, in some instances, it can cause people to leave if it happens consistently, right? It's
happened.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you think about your team, we've talked about this a couple of times now, is more important than your customers. Sounds backwards, right? But a great team will serve customers in a way that creates a lot of value for you as a business and for those customers. When you let customers interfere with your team, it hurts the whole organization, which means you hurt the future customers. It sounds all backwards, right? But there are so many potential customers that we talked about segmentation a few minutes ago too.
Yeah.
I'm going to look for the people where I have the best product for them and the best systems and experiences. Then I'm going to market like crazy to go get them. And sometimes I'm going to market to people who come into our environment that are not a good fit. And remember I talked about I'm working with college students about developing personal finance. Well, there's some very sophisticated college students when it comes to investment strategies. They're not a good fit for me. I'm not going to change our product because somebody is a very sophisticated, maybe taught by their parents or learned on their own.
Sure.
They're not a good fit. I'll talk to them, I'll help them for sure, but they're not a good fit for our business. And so we say no to them. Right, you're going to find it's the same thing. There's a certain experience set or experience, like bring in customers. Maybe it's geography, and all of a sudden somebody wants a job that's outside of your range and doesn't fit your team. Whatever it is, I think it's okay to say no.
Yeah, learn how to say no more. By the way, Sony. Okay, this Alpha 3 camera, Jen, make sure you clip this and tag Sony in it. Why does it shut off after 30 minutes? The first time I recorded a session was an hour and a half long, and we got the first like 28 minutes, and the rest was kaputs, and then I had to do the whole thing audio only. And it was a good episode, and it was less good because I couldn't have the video. So let's, unless I'm doing something wrong, in which case have somebody reach out to me.
Come on, Sony, step up your game.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're running a business, I made a piece of content it was a little bit ago, maybe 6 months ago, about vanity stats, right? Not all stats are meaningful. Some can be misleading. And I talked about like weight loss, right? You can lose 20 pounds and look and feel far shittier than if you lose 7 pounds and put on a ton of muscle mass. Like depending on what your objective is, like that would dictate what KPIs are important to you. If you're trying to bulk up and put on mass, like maybe pay more attention to your muscle density and your the percentage of body fat, right? Or if you just want to slim down, maybe you do more cardio versus heavy lifting, right? So if you're running a business, what are the key performance indicators, the numbers that are most important to you to gauge not only the financial healthiness of the company, but ultimately the different facets of your business and how it operates?
Yeah, I think they're different for every kind of business, for sure, right? I mean, you have to align them with the kind of business that you have. And I see lots of different kinds of business, all kinds of KPIs. There are a lot of vanity metrics, like things like clicks on websites, right? But clicks that don't convert those are those vanity metrics that don't really matter.
They might even be bots.
They could be bots, absolutely. And so what happens is I think what you want to do is just align with your business, right? So revenue is always important. So those things that drive actual revenue, I always like to start with, okay, so there's a sale. How do we back up, and what's that lead gen funnel, and what do we have to do in our marketing? And those are the things I watch. I don't really care if people click on our website if they don't convert. Right, so a lot of people will spend a lot of money to do things that don't lead to actual sales. So sales is always king to me, right? So it's the number one thing. And I think most entrepreneurs say that. Like the hardest thing to really focus on is sales, and make sure you drive. All your operations can align with the sales volume. So I focus almost entirely on how do I do that know, like, and trust, and how do people try and buy my product so that they repeat purchase and refer me to other people, right? So that's that process that I always use. But then there's other things. There's things in your business that you're going to find out. Here's an example. On personal finance, there's only 4 expenses that account for almost all of a person's spending. And yet we have people who are micromanaging their budget on the things that maybe are an extra $10 a month. Doesn't make any sense, right? So in your business, you're probably the same thing. And in my other businesses, I always had this, is I focused on the key cost drivers that were the largest ones. And so I just wanted to really make sure I managed those. The other ones I didn't stress about, right? So I'm not going to nitpick a $10 charge when we're spending millions of dollars on other things inside of a business. We're going to really focus on those. So I didn't ever want to have too many KPIs. And I communicated them to everybody on the team, everybody within the business, so everybody knows what we're pointed towards. So the other ones are customer-driven, like project-driven. So I always wanted to make sure I delighted every customer, that I exceeded their expectations in interaction with my business. And so that's where I would focus on. What are those attributes that a customer would use to measure our performance, right? So whatever that is in your business, try to figure out what that is. It's maybe, here's an example. A lot of people don't understand this one at all, is that, again, customers need to trust you. But trust is a emotion, really, that is about predicting your future behavior, right? So you and I have interacted so many times, I can trust that you will do whatever you say, because you always do. Well, if I'm, that use your roofing business, if I'm a roofer and I just met this customer, how do they trust me? So I need to build touch points, performance indicators that say, okay, I promise to do something, I deliver. So I used to have KPIs that would be how many touch points where we made a promise and delivered, because I knew that ended up in trust. Trust leads to purchases, right? So sometimes, even before you get to a quote, say, I'm going to be at your property at 5 o'clock. Don't show up at 5:30. Okay, show up at 5. Okay, if you're not sure you're going to get there at 5:30, promise 5:30 and just hang on it, right? Say, okay, don't tell them everything right away. Say, I'm going to research that for you. I'm going to get back to you tomorrow by 8 a.m. and get back by 8 a.m., right? Keep layering in ways to do that. So I used to have a whole bunch of KPIs about trust, because I thought that was really important for our business and our relationship with customers. So those are the ones that I always used.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, the trust is important, and that's where brand comes in, right? If you guys are building a brand and doing things to ultimately convince people that you're an authority when it comes to, roofing, let's say, or anything else, any type of business you're running, it makes the conversation so much easier when you get there, because there's less of a guard up, right? Same thing with roofers, right? I put out content so that, like, when you hit me up, you kind of trust me. It makes the sale easier. There it is. Spoiler alert. Yeah, selfishly, that's what I want to do. I want to make the conversation as easy as possible. I want to give you guys knowledge, as much information as possible that helps you, because that builds trust, right? You guys can start building trust with branding preemptively, but pick up the phone, right? There's a notch on the trust belt. As soon as you pick up the phone and they called 2 other contractors that didn't, there's a little bit of trust there. Okay, we're going to have somebody follow up with you to schedule an appointment within the hour. Within the hour they call, there's a little bit of trust built. And like you said, every step of the way, if there's 37 opportunities to build trust and you hit the mark on all 37 of them, the conversation becomes a lot easier when you're asking them for a $20,000 check.
Yeah, well, the decision moves away from price.
Right.
See when there isn't trust, it's all about price, right? Because we're not experts at buying a roof. Right. So multiple people are going to show up and we're going to go with the lowest cost, unless somebody has built that trust. And the trust is, makes us feel like, they're experts and they're going to do things. I mean, maybe it's as simple as, hey, we're going to go through a 7-step process in order to do your estimate. So here's what to expect when I arrive. And right, sometimes when you even do simple things like that, it builds trust. Because then, he told me that he was going to go through this process and we have everything ready to go. So I don't know what it is in roofing, but I love to have standard processes that everyone on the team follows. If we can improve it, we always improve it. But that way, there's an expectation we deliver every single time, because we have process, right?
I love that you said that, the 7 different things, because we're building out Conversion Max, which will be launching in the next 30 days, I believe. And if you're listening to this is the first time it's been dropped in public, so you're welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you listen to the next one, because we'll drop some secrets there too. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to create automations from the inception of the lead through the purchase of the project and even thereafter, right? And one of the sequences is here. The problem is sales reps just don't follow up. I tell you guys all the time, have your sales reps follow up, document the CRM, and people don't do it. I didn't do it as a sales rep. I didn't follow up 8 times. No fucking way, right? Because I knew that I had other opportunities. And if I've got 3 people waiting to say yes and 2 that already haven't said yes, I'll go talk to the 3 that might say yes, because I feel like they're more inclined to say yes. And if the other 2 that didn't say yes want to, they'll call me. It's a sense of entitlement. Fuck.
You're arrogant.
Arrogant as fuck. So with that being said, one of the sequences that we're creating is like, okay, it goes from a lead to, let's say, appointment set to appointment held, then the contract signed. So if it's sitting in appointment held for 24 hours, we know the contract didn't get signed. So now we start a sequence. Hey, Mr. Customer, it's Mike with ABC Roofing, and I just wanted to touch base just to make sure you didn't have any other questions. If you do, don't hesitate to reach out. Second sequence would be something along the lines of, hey, just wanted to follow up. We understand how big of a decision this is to make in your home when purchasing a roof. It warrants careful consideration. We've got over 80 years of combined experience in the marketing or in the roofing business, and we want to make sure you make an educated decision. please reach out if you have any questions. But then the third one is going to be, here's 7 things that our future or our previous customers have found helpful in making their decision. And here's what can happen if you choose the wrong contractor, right? So the 7 things, right? And we want to force a yes or a no. Like at the end of the day, I don't want to let somebody off easy. If you've invested, they owe you that. If you've invested the money into marketing, the time in building your brand, the time of your salesperson, they owe you a yes or no. So hold them accountable to it. Keep following up with them until they give you something.
I think that's fair. And plus, think about it. A lot of times it's a complicated decision. It's a high-priced item.
Right.
And so sometimes people just lock up. Right? Yeah. They're not good at decisions, and they're looking at these proposals. They don't really understand. They don't even know what questions to ask you.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe the husband and wife are disagreeing, and one person and before you know it, the easy answer, let's not do anything.
Yeah. We'll wait till at least get them figured out then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think the way that you nurture them along in that kind of campaign is just being human. It's just connecting to how people make decisions. Some people, we might look at something and go, yeah, that one. And other people, they just aren't used to making these kind of decisions. I mean, think about some of these purchases are one of the biggest purchases they make in their life.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's protecting their largest investment, their home. And so I think if you frame it in that and you nurture it, that's okay. They want help. Customers want value creation in their life. They want you to help them. They don't want to be sold, but they want you to help buy, if you think of it that way. So I think that's a cool idea. Thanks for doing that for people. I mean, is that something that your clients will be able to tap into as part of your service?
Yeah. So essentially, that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay. Yep. I've been doing this almost a decade, and it's a pervasive issue. It doesn't matter if it's a $500,000 owner operator or if it's a $10 million company. Like, they have a lot of the same. There's a lot of things that are different, but a lot of the pain points are yet the same. So it'll be an opportunity to solve a pain point in a very meaningful way, I think.
Awesome.
And I mean, I've asked a bunch of people, and they said it was a good idea. So and they'd be the ones. They would be our target market. So you taught me that would be a good move then. So I had to do it.
Yeah, if you think about it, that person that is running the rest of their business is not going to build the tech. Remember, we talked about that. They got to outsource or find people who can build that for them, who understand what they need to be able to deliver. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, shucks, you're making me blush. Oh, man. So when I started my business, when I was thinking about starting my business, I went back and forth a bunch of times, this was far before the inception. Then I got to the point where it's like, fuck it, right? If I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. And you know what? And I've been in really shitty situations in life, as have you, I'm sure. Everybody's got their own set of shitty circumstances and shit sandwiches they've eaten in life. And you get through it. You figure it out. And some things are easier to get through. Some things are tougher. But at the end of the day, shoot your shot. I'm going to shoot my fucking shot. Swing me the ball. What would you say to folks that, may be listening to this that aren't in business, but they've been going back and forth and deliberating and weighing their options, and they're afraid of the possibility of failing, whether it's because of the financial complications that would result of it, or shame or humiliation because they didn't make it? What would you say to them?
So I never had this when we had class together, right? And I learned this by working with lots of students, and I saw really capable students who didn't start companies. And then I went out and I was doing consulting, and really talented people didn't start companies. I started to ask them a lot of questions, do some research to understand. I came up with the answer. It's that what happens is the market, the people around you, tell you that entrepreneurship is super risky. And so what they do, and there's lots of cool research to show you about human bias, and what happens is that people tend to do things like think about a pessimistic point of view. They think about worst case scenarios, and all these things are in our brains to protect us, right? And what I found is that people who don't start frame the problem as this huge risk that's going to bankrupt them, ruin their relationships, ruin their health. They're thinking about the absolute worst case. So it's just too risky. And so what happens is they avoid going into business because of the small percentage chance of that catastrophic loss. Right. But when they don't go into business, though, they fail to get the opportunity of all the abundance that comes, the thriving that comes from successful business. Right. So I thought, how do I attack this? So what I did is I just split the pie. I said, listen, let's just eliminate the catastrophic loss from the possibilities. Let's understand what that is. Is it humiliation? Is it money? Is it time? What is it? And so I actually have people document what that is, and I have them stay away from that. So let's say you're okay investing $50,000 to start your business, right? You need a van and you need materials and hire a couple people. So what I do is I show people how to stick to that as the limit, because past 50,000, that is catastrophic for people in this case. And so we actually came up with a process where you get started and your runway is 50K. You get really creative as you start getting to 10, 20, 30 and spend, right? You get to have high urgency. And what we found is the people who wouldn't start, when they start knowing that they can't have catastrophic loss, end up with successful companies. The whole key is you got to actually be in business to thrive. And so what we found is that people won't start because their mind has them thinking that this is going to be a disaster. And guess what? Their friends and family tell them it's going to be a disaster. 9 out of 10 companies fail, which is actually not actually a true fact, but that's a made-up statistic. But so they hear that all the time. They just won't do it. When many times you'll be successful. I know that our metrics and the companies I work with are far more than 50% have very successful companies from launch. So, but people think about it. I always say, what would happen if LeBron James was worried about making the basketball team, so he never went out for basketball? He wouldn't have that life that he has today, or any of the athletes you can name. Josh Allen here in Buffalo. I mean, what if he's afraid to make the team, so he wouldn't go out because, oh my gosh, somebody might not think he's cool, and he wouldn't be the Bills quarterback now. So I find the same thing. And we've studied hundreds of companies and found that the single biggest thing that keeps them from launching is that fear of catastrophic loss. So it's don't have people walk in the room with a snake. Work your way towards that snake.
Baby steps, folks.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think of everything, and too often in just routine day-to-day life, I think of like best case, worst case, and everything in between, but I always have an inherent edge or hedge towards the worst case scenario. And I think sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's bad, because it does preclude me from doing some things at some times that I think would be good for me, right? Because it's just a little bit too risky. And it's so funny because in some elements of my life, I'm very risk adverse, and in some not. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, don't you think that's because in some areas you have experience, right?
Sure.
You have that confidence we talked about.
Yeah.
In other areas you don't. There are 118 documented cognitive biases that humans have that protect us from risk. 118. So you have to work hard to overcome those as an entrepreneur, because your brain is telling you way too risky. Don't do this.
Yeah.
Go get a corporate job, right? That's what, go work for somebody else. That's what people tell you. The other thing I find is most people do that kind of life. They don't go and start their own business. So that is what's natural for them. So they're like, be like me, go work for a company. But many of your listeners are entrepreneurial. They want that freedom we talked about to create their own business, to run their own, to be with the people they want to be with, to create value in the way they want to create value. They want the rewards that come with successful companies. We're different. We're kind of the renegades, right? And so we're the people that we live a different lifestyle. And so what happens is we have to understand handling risk, because the rest of the world's going to try to pull you back and say, that's really risky. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's normal for humans to feel that risk.
Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of my past customers, current customers, and share similarities of the past, where it's like I worked for somebody else. And for some people, working in a corporate environment or working in underneath a hierarchy of people, like that's good with them. They're okay with it. They can leave their work at home, and it's fantastic. I can never do that. One of the things that was always just wildly infuriating to me is like having somebody tell me something who's removed from the situation, doesn't have the context, and I'm like, we might want to try to do it this way, and they're like, no, just shove the square into the round peg, or the square peg into the round hole. And it's like, no, but we should maybe try doing this way. Like, I'm letting you know what the customer is saying. Nah, we're going to do it this way, and because this is the way that we do it. Or like in sales, you're going to do 25 calls a day because it's a numbers game, and you know 25 calls is going to give you 2 appointments, and if you get 10 appointments a week, you'll get 2 sales, and if you get 2 sales, and they've got this math equation. It's like, that's fantastic, but what if I've got a better recipe? What if I know better? There's nuance.
Sometimes you do.
Right, because I'm of the mindset like, hey, this is for any digital marketers listening, this is a sales hack for you. So what I would do is, instead of just blindly calling through Google or Home Advisor, I'd go to their Facebook. I'd find a list, right? And it would probably be somebody on Google Local Services doing Google Ads. I know they're spending money. I have that. I understand that they value marketing in some capacity and advertising. So then I would find the company. I would go on Mansa.com. I'd find the owner's name. Okay. From there, I would go to Facebook and I would like their Facebook page, their business page. So now when I call them, it's not necessarily a cold call, right? Because nobody likes getting fucking cold called. It sucks. It works, but again, I would take a more nuanced approach, and I would assume that I'm talking to you, right? So if it's Bob's Roof, and I'm like, "Hey, Bob," you're like, "What's up, man?" Like, I don't ask you if it's Bob. I'm gonna assume it's Bob, and then when you tell me it's Bob, and we're gonna start having a conversation, I'll be like, "It's Mike Stearns." I'm like, "Oh, you just liked my Facebook page." I did, and the reason I did that is because I work with a roofing contractor, about 300 miles away from you, and they're getting leads at around $120 a piece. I saw your Google ad, and I thought there were some things that piqued my interest, Bob, and I wanted to talk about it. You think it's worth a conversation? And it worked. But I'd only do 10, 12 calls a day. And then the rest of the time that I had that would be left over, I would spend in like customer experience, working with my customers, doing things above and beyond what the call of duty was to create that customer experience that's sticky, that people like, and ultimately to feel good about it, right? I don't know. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it worked for me. So the point of that, I say that to say that me working in the confines of being told what to do when it doesn't make rational sense for me created like a dissonance within me that was it was soul crushing every day to deal with. I hated it.
Yeah, and we're not saying that the people who take the other path are wrong.
No.
It's not right. That's right for them.
Yeah.
What happens is we're the people who are being creative and want to do things in a unique way that creates value for people. We want those freedoms again, right?
I want to be free.
There's other people who are like, nope. I just like going to work at 8 and leaving at 5 and calling it a day. They're great at what they do, right? I mean, they like to go through that step-by-step process kind of thing. Companies, when you build your company, you're going to want people like that, right? People follow processes and follow rules. You don't want your accountant, making up your tax return, right? Because they're being creative. Let's be creative on 9/12.
Right.
Right? You're not doing that one. But that leaves space for us.
Yeah.
But for us, what I would say is, we don't want to be trapped in that environment. It was hard for me. I worked in the corporate world for a long period of time, and before I left and became an entrepreneur, right? And I wanted the freedom of being creative and doing my own thing. But we don't put them down. But the problem is, it is soul crushing when there's a better way, and there's no way to express that, right? Because you're inside of another business.
Yeah, I think it comes down to being self-aware and knowing what you want and what type of person you are. I'm super envious of the people that can check out at 4:30 and they have the ability just to be done with work, right? And they can go do whatever it is they're going to do, and they're like, that's what makes them happy. My brain doesn't work like that. It doesn't shut off. I mean, that dissonance that I was talking about, that anxiety that would be created as a result of like me feeling like I could do something better and nobody listening, like, I took that shit home with me. I thought about it all the time. So like, I'm working 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever. And then after it, I'm thinking about work and like all the things that I'm frustrated about. So there is no right or wrong answer. It's just finding a situation that suits you. And for me, it was, taking my shot and being my own boss. Because at the end of the day, I can hold myself accountable. If this shit flops, there's nobody else's fault but your own. If it thrives, it's the team. It's because of the team.
It's kind of true. What's interesting is we make a decision as entrepreneurs, right? That we will live and die in our business based on the value we create. We're totally responsible for the business, right? Not everybody that works in an organization takes that. Right. So one of the things you have to be comfortable with is, hey, if we don't create value for customers, I got to go do something else, right? But that is a choice we make as an entrepreneur. I'm okay with that. Right? That comes back to, you have to have a level of confidence. A person that's not confident, doesn't have confidence, is not going to live off of their, kind of eat what they kill. Right? And so if you can't do sales, you can't build a team, you can't build a value creation method in your business, you can't go get roofing clients, you don't know how to put roofs on, you don't know how to do any engineering, you don't know how to do customer service, then that's probably a bad move for you, right? So we don't want to be in those jobs that are very one-dimensional.
Yeah, and the same way, the other half of that, they don't want to be in a position where there's inherently just a ton of risk and it's solely on that. Like, everybody's comfortable with different things. Everyone's uncomfortable with different things. It's all good.
We're all unique.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's one thing you want to leave with the audience before we get out of here?
Michael was the best student I ever had.
Oh, shit.
I'm really serious. Is that I had a corporate career. I was an entrepreneur. I decided to become an academic, which was kind of a crazy choice. But I really thought I could impact people and help them start companies. And the very first class I had, you were in my class. Okay, so I didn't really know what I was doing yet. But
act as if.
Act as if. I fooled them. You know, I still have video of you presenting in class, I think. Yeah.
I was talking real fast, wasn't I?
No, you're awesome. You're awesome. No, I think it's just really as an entrepreneur, think about the freedoms that you get to create in your life and focus on what that bigger purpose is, right? A lot of people say follow your passion. We didn't talk about this today, but I just think that's kind of silly. Because the reality is that that's just, that you do things that are fun and all those kind of things. But what we find is if you want to build a meaningful business that helps your community, builds for your family, helps customers, successful companies get to sponsor the Little League team in town. If that's the kind of life that you want to live as a leader in your community and do it through expressing your business and growing your business, that's going to come with some of those pains that we talked about, those ups and downs. That's a purpose kind of driven thing. So I always tell people, really think about, if you think about yourself 20 years from now, what do you want to accomplish in life? And stay focused on that big vision. And then think about that staircase that you go through to get there, right? And that's the kind of things that we did in class, right? And okay, how do we go out at 20 years from now? Well, you talked about starting a business, and you talked about the kind of life, and you tried all kinds of things, right? You talked about going up to Gates Vascular and thinking about software. There's lots of other things that you tried along the way, and all of those built your skills and to where you got to today. But I would say just keep making progress. Everyone in your audience realize that you're at some point, and every 90 days, just look back and celebrate that you've made progress towards those big goals that we just talked about. And that if you got that client, great. If you started your company, you have an idea, you grew your business, maybe you hired a team member for the first time, right? Those are the kind of things to celebrate, and I bet you they should share them with you. Right? So your clients maybe share inside this podcast and build a community of people that support each other. We do it with alumni, right? So there's students that I have that I contact all the time, and we're constantly sharing successes, and sometimes there's some bumps that they call and talk them through, that kind of thing. And that's okay. But I think it's just those are the big things. It's just think about continually making progress, get other people in your life, and go enjoy those freedoms and serve your communities.
I love that, and I concur. I think that's a great way to close it out. So with that being said, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the team at Roofer for help bringing this to life. And there will be more segments of myself and Mr. Neubert.
Listen, thanks for having me. I always appreciate it.
Likewise. And we out.